8 o'clock where I am here in London, 3 p.m. over on the East Coast, and 12 p.m. On the Pacific. What I'm going to do is I'll bring in Natasha right now. So please give us a nice seasonal round of applause for Natasha MacKenzie. Hi, Natasha.
Hi.
Hey. Where are you right now this evening?
Just outside Manchester, actually.
Oh, nice. A little bit up north here in the UK. I'm in Finsbury Park in London, quite near Arsenal, which is the easiest way people will understand where this is through our soccer teams. Before we kick off, would you like to talk a bit more about yourself and your background and how you got into book design?
Yeah, sure. Well, I started out actually in graphic design. I was a graphic designer for 5 years, I want to say. It could have been a bit longer. And then I went back to get my master's in publishing, which I'm really glad I did, because that brought me into book design, which I've been doing for the last 3 years, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. I worked for publishers, authors, a range of clients across a range of genres, industries, and it's amazing.
Right, fantastic. And so, yeah, I guess it really helps if you end up working in the sort of area that you absolutely love. What sort of books have you been reading this year that have really caught your eye? Not just from a design point of view, but that you've really enjoyed reading?
Oh God, there's so many. Obviously, I love all the books I designed for, but one that's really stood out for me, not that I designed myself, but Caitlin Moran's book, How to Be Famous. That one actually made me cry in public. I am not too ashamed to admit that. It made me cry in public. It was so good. So that one's definitely high on the list. Oh God, there's really so many. I can't really think off the top of my head.
We'll put you on the spot, but Caitlin Moran's new book, High Praise Indeed. It's a couple of minutes after. I reckon we should maybe get a start on this presentation. I'll bring up the slide deck that you prepared earlier. As I mentioned, I have the ability to punch into images to make them a bit louder. Maybe as a nice surprise for people who tune in late, you can shout "computer enhance" whenever you want it to, and it seems like it's magic to them. But anyway, I'll catch you a bit at the end. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Martin. Okay, hi guys. Basically, I think Martin said, I'm not going to be able to get to everybody's cover. We had such an overwhelming submission and such an eclectic range of covers that even if I can't get to your cover today, I at least tried to do a range so you could at least look at the genre and the points that I make about it. And then hopefully that'll at least help and give you a bit of an insight into what you should be looking for in terms of your own cover when it comes to your genre. I'll also give some key points to what makes a great cover that you can take away as well. And I've also included throughout this just a couple random ones that I selected that I've reworked just a little bit just to help show you what it is that I'm talking about, just because I'm a very visual person, surprise. So I really like to see something visually when it's being talked about, just because it helps me understand a bit better. So I have a few of those as well. So getting started, the best place to start would be genre. So the first book that I'd like to talk about here is Four Hearts that was submitted. This one was submitted with a really, really long range of genres. And while there are elements of this cover that I do like, the butterflies, the photos chosen of the women's faces are really delicate and really beautiful. It's difficult to understand what it is I'm looking at when it actually comes to the cover and what type of story I'd actually be reading. So when you have so many genres across the board, when you look at them all together, the mixed genres, the next slide of mixed genres, thank you. When you look at all of these, so each one of these is a genre that was mentioned for this book, Four Hearts. Now, as you can see, they are so different when it comes to fonts, colors, the way it's laid out, sizing, everything is so drastically different. It's going to be really, really difficult to try to mash all these genres together to have something that not only works for the book, but that can fit next to each one of these examples perfectly. So when it comes to your cover, I'd really focus on 1 to maybe 2 genres, the things that really, really stand out in the story, narrow it down and focus on that. So looking at the synopsis for Four Hearts, I picked young adult and fantasy. These were the 2 elements that really, really struck me when it came to the story. So looking at the young adult and fantasy covers that are in the market, Court Thorns of Roses, The Wicked King, Caraval. As you can see, they're really, really bold. There's a one element that the covers really, really focus on. There's really playful fonts. The fonts work with the art. Everything is one cohesive piece with that whimsical style and artistic elements. Looking at the before and after of Four Hearts, what I would suggest doing when it comes to your cover is picking out that one element in your book that you really, really want to stand out and focus on that. The main colors that come across in young adult fantasy are blue and amber hues, which you already have going for you in the cover, which is a great start. I would just, like I said, make that cohesive a bit more in terms of how it works with the imagery, whether it's illustrated. This genre really opens up to illustrations, which is really, really great. You could have something custom made by an illustrator to really portray your story the way you want to. Mix the elements together, maybe have a woman's face surrounded by the butterflies, maybe the toadstools coming up around her, one particular striking image that people can look at. And make sure the fonts you're using are really playful, whimsical, decorative, really, really scream fantasy. Moving on to fantasy, The Blood of Fallen God. I really liked this cover. I thought the image, as you said, was really great. You look at it and you know exactly what genre you're looking at. It's fantasy, it screams it, it's great. The only comments I would make here would have to do more with the typography. Most people, when they look at a book cover, are going to be looking at it on their phone. Most people live on their phones nowadays. It's just how it goes. So if they're scrolling through Amazon or Waterstones or what have you, the book's going to be super tiny. So you want to make sure that everything stands out, especially for this genre. If you look at the fantasy comps that I have, every single one of them has really, really strong type, whether it's the author who is selling the book. George Martin is a huge, huge name, so he's big and bold. Everything is really, it's really strong. It's the main bit that you're looking at when it comes to the cover. And everything around it is really, it creates a mood, it creates an atmosphere, lots of metallics, finishes, embossing, anything that really brings you into that fantasy element. So this is one of the ones that I did a little bit of a play with, a little bit of a mock-up. It's really, really rough, but it just gives you that general idea of what I'm talking about. So you couldn't even see the author name on this cover, which was really unfortunate. So I just brought that up a bit so you could really know who it is that actually wrote the book, because we're selling you guys too. So we want to make sure that the author name is really legible. You can play around with the balance a bit. Don't be afraid to do that. So move elements to the top. I moved the Forge Master Cycle Book 1 to the top. It's a really good place to have, because that's one thing when you're creating, especially a series, your type, however it's laid out, really should be consistent across the series. So that's a good place to have it, because it's legible, but it's a little bit out of the way. The title I've made big and bold. Don't be afraid to play with the space here. We want people to know the title. We want it to be in their face. And even doing that, the image is still really, really strong. You can still see what's going on. And just bring out like a couple little elements in the back, create some depth to it, and to just really draw the reader in. Claimed by Nikolai, the sci-fi novel. This one, the first thing I'll say is the font is perfect. It screams sci-fi, it's great. It's very, very fitting of the genre. I would maybe bring up the author name a bit again, just because it is really tiny. The main thing with this cover is there is a lot going on. I do get a feeling of sci-fi from it, but not as much as I should, especially if it's sitting next to other sci-fi novels on the bookshelf. There's a lot of blending going on here with certain elements, and because certain ones are soft and really hard, it's hard to make out the individual elements. If you look at the sci-fi genre as a whole and the different books that are coming out, everything is really, really strong when it comes to color and contrast. So lots of greens, lots of blues, lots of oranges. Blacks are deep, deep, rich blacks. As I said, you got the font perfect. Everything's really sans serif, so without the little tickies on the end. Really clean, and like I said, bold, bright, mixing the surreal with the real. Moving on to horror. Transfer. This one, really great image choice here. Just looking at it, I got the Ring vibe, and it was super creepy, and it's great. And again, red and black, it screams horror, so it's really, really good. Again, here, the only thing that I would make tweaks on would be the typography. It's really, really bold on your cover, but if you look at the more modern horrors that are on the bookshelves at the moment, everything's really delicate, really spaced out. It's not so important whether it's serif or sans serif in terms of the font you use, so with the little end dashes or without. But it is delicate, and it works with the imagery. Everything's really bold. As I said, you got the colors dead on, so red, black. It uses a lot of orange. If you're going to use white or anything really soft, make sure you have something equally as creepy and strong and dark on the opposite end of stuff, just because you don't want things to look too, well, like I said, soft, really. If you look at The Winter People, for example, it's a white cover, but the element, the mood, the atmosphere, everything that it's giving you, it just draws you in and makes you feel uncomfortable in your own skin. So if you're going to go down that route, just make sure all the other elements are giving off what that black, red, orange color is meant to do. So this is another one that I did just a little mock-up for. It's, again, really, really rough, but just to kind of show you a bit of what I was getting at in terms of the fonts, just lighter. Try not to use too many. If you're going to use multiple fonts on a cover, I'd stick to 2. If you have lots of different lines of text, so title, author, tagline, quotes, etc., that's when you could probably go out of the box a little bit by maybe extending it to 3, but you really don't want to have too much going on in terms of fonts, because it just distracts the eye and makes everything just look a bit too cluttered. And as the image is such a great image, don't hide it. It's looking at it, it just makes you think she's going to crawl out of that cover and come at you. So make her the forefront, make her the focus, make her the draw that makes people want to pick up your book. Extending into thriller, The House of Vipers. This one, definitely the mood is perfect for thriller. It already makes me wonder what the heck is going on in that house. The only thing I would say when it comes to this cover, well, just to start, would be I'd be careful about using the same elements that you've used in previous books on the series for books later in the series. I know this cover is very, very similar to book 2 in the series, and I would just be careful with that, because you don't want people who haven't come across your series before to think that it's multiple, and you don't want people to think, who do follow the series, that it's just a re-release or that it's the same book with just a different object on it. You really want to make them different. You can definitely have the same tone. Obviously, I spoke about making sure the layout when it comes to the typography is the same, but in terms of what's actually on the cover, make it its own. Have it fit, but make it its own. Looking at the thriller options here, Everything focuses on one main piece, which is really, really good. You have lots of sans serif fonts, so that would be another thing I'd probably look at, is changing it from a serif to a sans serif so it fits more within the genre. And bold contrasts are really, really great. If you look at any of these examples, the white against the yellow, the neon green against the black, they stand out. They make you want to see what it is going on the cover. So just a few tweaks just to show you what it is I mean in terms of the transfer. So when you look at the serif font to the sans serif, just how it cleans it up a bit, makes it fit a bit more in with the genre. Using those bold colors, so vibrant orange to help pick out a couple of the elements in what I think is their earring or the window, anything like that. You could go for a yellow if you want to be even bolder. And don't be afraid to play around with the font a little bit. It is clean and it is a sans serif, but don't be afraid to add those extra little elements to really draw the reader in. Another example for the thriller is They Call Me Rage. This cover, the only thing I...
Sorry, I just want to come in just for a second right now.
Sure, yeah.
Questions coming in. I thought this might be a good opportunity to ask a couple of them. The first one that sort of pops to mind here is I see this with a bunch of the different submissions we have where people put a novel whenever it's a novel. From your experience, is that something that's quite common or sort of just depends?
It really depends, actually. I mean, it's not necessary. I wouldn't say it's mandatory because most people who pick up a novel know it's a novel. But sometimes it does actually help. I know there's some covers I've seen, particularly when it comes to like Sherlock Holmes, for example. Those covers, sometimes they do put a novel on it just because it actually works with the design. It's like a nice little element that you could put in there. Sometimes depending on, I mean, just using Sherlock Holmes as an example as well. There's so many different types of stories that go on in Sherlock Holmes now that Sherlock Holmes in itself can spread across so many different genres. So sometimes it is helpful to have it in just so they know what it is they're picking up. But
yeah, they're getting some value out of it at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, like I said, it's not mandatory, but if you want to use it, as long as it works with the design, it's cool. Not bad.
I have another question here from, well, no, wrong one, from Shayla. Can you discuss font size for author name? I think she's referring to one of the earlier ones, but it applies to the House of Viper ones as well. Like how, what's the sort of your process with deciding like how big the author name should be?
Basically, so the size of the author name, actually, that was one thing that I was going to mention as well, is that it only really needs to be massive. So if you, like George R. Martin, if you look at his books, it's gigantic. Neil Gaiman, Stephen King, they're really, really big because they have huge, huge franchises. So they actually sell the book. So you should really only make the author's name gigantic if that's the main bit selling the book. If it's not, ideally, it really depends on the design because it's all about balance. You want to make sure that it works with the design so it's not detracting from anything, but you do want it legible at least at like a thumbnail size. You don't want it too tiny in the corner that nobody can see what it is. Because as I said, even though the title is what people want to see, at the same time we're selling you, so we should still at least be able to tell who you are on the book.
Right, yeah, so big enough to sort of read at a thumbnail, but not so big that you might think it's the title.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm going to pop up back, resume this. I'll just...
Perfect. Okay. So, They Call Me Rage. So this one, there is a lot going on with this cover as well. The background is really competing with the type, which makes it a bit difficult to see. I really get where you're trying to go and what it is you're actually trying to say to the potential reader, but unfortunately, without being able to read your title, it actually takes away from your cover. I like the fact that you're being creative with the font, but you might want to tone it down just a little, like I said, so it's more legible and fits more in line with what is in the thriller market. So sans serif, a bit more simple, a bit more clean line. In terms of the layout, the general layout, the knife is the main focal point. So why don't you play with that? You could tone down the background a bit, so it's almost like a wash in the back. So you can kind of tell there's blood running down a wall, but maybe not quite. Bring the knife up in size, maybe have somebody holding it, make it the forefront element, just like a few of the other covers that we just saw in the comps for Thriller. Make it big and bold, and maybe have the text work around it. And in this case, I would also differentiate the font between the title and the author, because the same problem with the author font at the bottom, it just gets lost and it's really difficult to see. The President's Mistress, the political thriller. I really love the feeling of this cover. I thought the image was absolutely beautiful. I really like the wash over it. The tone is really, really suited to a political thriller. I really like, I think whoever made the cover did a really great job of blending all the elements together that you could tell each one, but didn't detract from the others. The only thing in this one, I would also say, would again just be the typography. The President's is perfect, but Mistress is just that bit too feminine that it starts drawing away from a political thriller and almost wants to bring you into the women's fiction, modern and contemporary fiction side of things. In this case, I would also bring up the author's name just a bit. It doesn't need a lot because it is a really delicate cover. This is one of the instances where it doesn't really need to be big and bold like you would for a horror or a thriller, but you still want to be able to see the author's name. The only other thing I would also comment is when you have such a huge negative space, I'm talking about the space at the top of the book that just features the type, it's good just to make sure that you have a bit of balance. So in this case, if you brought up, you wouldn't need to do it a lot, but just the White House and the flag, if it was brought up just ever so slightly, so you almost have that half and half, it would just bring a bit more balance to the cover. But other than that, like I said, I really, really liked this one. Moving on to Crime and Mystery. A Palette for Love and Murder. I really love the title for this book. There is so much potential with this. My mind just started going crazy with all the things that you could do for this cover. Looking at the option that you have here, I would say this is another case where there's a lot of fonts going on. So you have, even though some of them may be the same, so even though there may only be 2 or 3 fonts in this case, there are so many different effects, different shadows, different shades that are working with them. It makes everything really distracting, so it's hard to see which bits you're looking at because the eye just kind of wants to go all over the place. When it comes to the background, because you have such a strong visual for a palette and you're really making that the paint and the blood and such a focal point, you don't really need the half and half background that you have. The textures aren't really that important in this instance. It would be stronger to have just a solid color, maybe a bit of texture, but I'd make it the whole background just to make that palette stand out even more and just even more in your face. Also, I'd be mindful of what imagery effects you're using. I'm not sure if this is an image that was purchased or when you made or anything like that, but it almost looks like there's a little bit of a painted grainy effect to it, which just pulls that out of Crime and Mystery. It almost starts drawing you into historical fiction, anything like that, that gives you that really, well, as if you were looking at a painting, which I know the title and I completely get what you're trying to drive at, but having the same effect on the palette just starts to shift what it is you're trying to do. With Crime and Mystery, same thing here. You want to go for sans serif fonts primarily and make them really, really strong and really bold and contrasty. So if you look at the books that are on the shelf right now, Again, sans serif across the board. The title is the main focus. Everything's really strong, really vibrant, really contrasty. This is the area, though, that differs from thriller, where you can play with different washes, mute down tones, anything like that. Definitely have a play and see what you get that can match these sort of covers. Damned Artist was another crime and mystery. This one, I really like the concept. The idea of what you're trying to achieve here is really, really cool. I just think that it's not quite there. There's a bit too much going on. You could almost focus primarily on the man who's looking at the woman's face through the crack, and I wouldn't even keep the window, the mirror that's in the top left. That's just adding something that's not necessarily important in what you're trying to portray in this cover. I would make things a bit more cohesive. And again, the author's name here, this is what I'm talking about when it's so tiny. You really lose it. If you were to look at this on a thumbnail, you wouldn't even know the author's name was on it. Same with A Novel Life. That would just get lost as well. It would just look like a purple box on the cover, unfortunately. So I'd play around with the fonts, the balance, and really develop that cover, the concept. Sugar Shack Whack for crime and mystery. Yay, Canada. I really, really like this. I know it's crime and mystery, but it's supposed to be a more lighthearted, funny type of crime and mystery. So even though some of these rules will still apply, there are a few you can get away with just because it's not supposed to be as dark and serious. The only thing I would really look at here, the font, it looks a bit generic, so you might want to have a play, maybe try a couple other fonts to clean line it. The stamp I thought was a really, really nice touch. I'm not sure if you want to bring that up a bit in size or the placement, because what you're having happen is with the Canadian flag, the maple syrup, and the stamp, you're creating a bit of an empty space on the right-hand side. And empty space isn't bad. It only creates a bit of an imbalance in your cover. And that's the only thing I'd be mindful of, is that you don't want everything way to one side. Everything should have a nice balance to it. The hole in the maple syrup is great. My only comment with the illustration is the pool of white at the bottom. Because I read the synopsis, I'm assuming this is supposed to be snow because it's at the Winter Festival. The only thing I would say is, because the cover is your main introduction to your story before they even know what your book is about, most people would look at that and they might not know what that pool of white is, if it's sugar, if it's snow. So if you're going down the snow route, if I'm right, and if it is snow, play with it. Maybe some snow in the background, adjust the color a bit, maybe bring in a bit of texture around it so it doesn't look so solid. Anything like that, just so you can really know what it is those elements are. But other than that, it's Canada, so love it. Women's fiction, Poppy. This is another really, really great one. I thought the image chosen is perfect for women's fiction. It's delicate, it's feminine, it's really, really strong, and the painting, whoever did it, it's really, really striking. Only a couple comments here with the typography. You're starting to lose book one into her head. You're getting a bit of a run-on line here. So you might want to look at bringing that up just a nudge, just to give that bit of space so you don't lose book one. June Rollins, the author name, could be brought up just slightly. And Poppy, mind your tracking, the spacing between the letters. It's a bit too far out for that type of font. And you might want to play with a couple other fonts when it comes to this. I do like where you're going in terms of the style, but you might want to explore just a couple more modern ones just to bring it up just that little bit more. The nice thing about women's fiction, if you look at the comps and what's around at the moment, is they're so different. We're not pigeonholed anymore. You don't need to have your cover look like another shopaholic. Not that I don't like that book, but it's really, really broad ranged women's fiction now. So in this case, you almost want to look at your subgenre to really target what it is you're looking. Each one of these has a different subgenre. So as you can see, they're all really different when it comes to fonts, colors, placement, layout, everything. So if you're doing women's fiction, I'd look at your subgenre and see what they're doing in the subgenre and try to model your cover closely to something that has those types of elements. Regent cover for young adults. I really, really liked the start of this. I think it's a really, really good jumping off point. The font chosen is great. YA definitely gives you more playful range when it comes to the fonts you use, but in terms of this type of YA, it's really, really good. The line at the bottom, you don't necessarily need, so I would probably remove that. And I'm going to assume it's a mailbox. I think it's a mailbox that's on the left-hand side. I'd bring that into the center because at the moment, everything's a bit off kilter. That's the only thing. So I'd bring that a bit more into the center. The other thing about this cover is because it's YA, you can play a lot with this. It's a nice halfway point between adult fiction and middle grade, where it's still a bit more grown up, but it still has the playful nature of middle grade books. So I'd almost take that mailbox, bring it to the center, bring it up, maybe take the title and make it part of the lettering on the mailbox, something like that. You could look at different doors and maybe make a door as the cover, just given what the book's about. Maybe a door knocker as the main focal point. There's lots you could do to represent that coming home feeling that will allow you to just make it a bit more creative, a bit more out there, and look great on the shelf. You did also mention when you sent this in that this book has been released, but with a different cover. I did take a look at the other cover as well, and because of the type of YA book this is, it is still a very fitting cover for your book. I completely understand why you like this one. Between the two, I actually do prefer this concept. If it was just developed a bit more with the mailbox and the lettering, as I said, I do prefer this one more. That's not to say the other cover was wrong. It's still fitting of your book. When you're looking at cover design for your book, there could be 50 different covers that would be perfect for your book. As long as it fits with the genre, you're doing the right thing. Just like any other form of art, it's subjective. So what you love may not necessarily be what somebody else loves, but it doesn't mean you're not going to pick up the story. As long as the cover fits the genre, you're fine. Young adult, looking at what's in the market. So as you can see, what I was talking about is the elements playing with the fonts. Everything's just a bit adult, but a bit more whimsical, like the middle grade side. Everything's kind of working together. If you look at The Truth About Lies, the typography works with the image. It looks like one solid image. Truly Devious is working in and amongst the vines. Everything works together as one piece. And all of them have a really nice center line. Maybe not necessarily through the type itself. For example, After the Fire, I know is a bit off to the left side, but everything has a really strong balance to it and a really strong center focal point. Moving in to middle grade. So now you can see what I mean. They, with the really strong colors is where we're getting to. So if you look at Emmett Locke and The Gatekeeper's Secret, the image for a middle grade book is perfect. You have so much color, so much going on. You immediately get a sense of adventure. The two kids unsure what to do and about to embark on who knows. The only issue would be the font here. So the font, while very pretty and whimsical, and you're on the right track, it's just a bit too adult. It's stretching into that YA, twilighty kind of feel. If you look at middle grade comps, all of the typography on them is really bold and really wacky and really all over the place. It's that one genre that you can really go nuts with, just like children's books. Everything works together like a piece of art. Nothing has to be perfectly in line. You have Never Tell all over the place. You have Terry Pratchett lettering all over the place. The Good Thieves, things that are at a diagonal, everything's really random. So it's your one area you really get to be wild and weird. So take advantage of it. This is another one that I did just a really, really rough mock-up so you can get what I'm talking about. If you look at the two covers, so this one I just played around a little bit. Bring Emmett Locke to the foreground. This is the main character, I'm assuming, that you really want to focus on, just like the Terry Pratchett books. So bring that to the forefront, let us know who it is, and then that you can keep consistent across the series. Keep everything in a streamlined, balance it out, spread out the elements a bit so the kids can see different parts and what it is they're looking at. Add a few extra touches to it. Let us feel the magic, bring us in. So like I said, just really rough, but have fun with it. It's the one genre, aside from kids' books, you can be really wild and weird, so go for it. Just moving on to the art of being Remy. This is another one that I really, really liked. The illustrations are adorable and the typography is so well done. I really, really loved this. I don't have much to say about it, actually. The only thing I couldn't tell was the blue line around the yellow frame. I couldn't tell if that was just part of the background of the JPEG or PNG, or if it was part of the actual design. If it was part of the actual design, I would say just get rid of that. It actually brings your book back. So by getting rid of it, you actually bring yourself up to a more modern standpoint. You don't need it. It's strong enough without the border. And my only other point would be the yellow in the middle. There's a lot of yellow going on, and middle grade books always have a really, really strong contrast. So you might want to play with, I'm not saying you have to, but you might want to play with the middle lighter yellow color. Maybe make it a white, or maybe then make it the blue. See what works, have a play, and see what really gives you that really, really strong contrast without taking too much away from the illustrations. But other than that, I really loved that one. Adventures of Smeagol the Beagle. This was another one that I thought was really, really great. The image is really well done. The balance of the fonts is really, really great. Sorry, in terms of the layout, I mean. The only thing I would be mindful of is how many fonts you have going on. So do be careful there, and just how many effects and different shades and colors and everything you're bringing in there. I know you only have yellow and black, but maybe try a different color for the black font and maybe see if you can cut down on one or two of the fonts. But other than that, I thought this was a really, really great start as well. Moving on to nonfiction. The Total Beginner's Guide to Self-Publishing. This cover has a lot going on. So one thing about nonfiction, if you look at the books on the shelf, they're really, really simple, really clean. There's only, there's one main image that's really strong and really bold. Everything plays more with the typography to let you know what it is you're looking at. So looking at a side-by-side of just what I would have done in terms of a start, again, another rough, but it gives you an idea of what I'm trying to explain here. So I'd be careful of the fonts. Everything's really sans serif, so I used a sans serif here. Use maybe a serif to bring out extra little details. Be careful of how you have placement of text. Because of the size and the angle of Total, it's hard to see where it is that it actually sits within the title when you have a quick glance. everything really streamlined, really center focal point. And when it comes to nonfiction, especially anything to do with self-help, make sure you have something on there that gives the reader a need, a benefit, something that brings you out of the competition and makes them want to pick up your book instead. So there are a lot books on the same subject. So you need to give them a reason to pick it up. So is this do you have tips that nobody else would have? Have you helped somebody self-publish a book and now they're famous? What do you have in your book that is going to make them want to get your book? So just going off of that as well, I put a little place for a quote at the top. So usually these are in place for if you have a book reviewer, or if there's a press release, or somebody within the industry who's taken a look at your book and given it a review. In this case as well, it couldn't hurt. As I said, if you have an author that you've helped self-publish and they've done really, really well, or it was a real good benefit to them, or they learned a lot from your book or something, have them write a review about it. Have them say, oh my God, this was the best book I've ever used ever, and put that in a quote and add their name, and there you go. It will really help you stand out and really give you that extra push so people will want to pick up yours as to another one that's sitting on the shelf. Sorry, I flipped through my notes here. Due North. Love the title of this one, of course. This is another one I don't really have a lot to say about. I think the type you picked is perfect. Sans serif, it's really nice, it's strong, it lets you know the title. Obviously, the travel little indicator, you're picking up a book that has to do with travel. It's really, really great. I love the shot. I love the image. It's really strong. It's playful. It makes you want to know what it is. My only comment here is balance. So because the kid is really, really far right, if you look at the left, you obviously have a big empty space of red brick. When you have a big empty space like that, you almost want to imagine an invisible box around it, and any text you're going to put in it should fit nice and comfortably and center in that box. So my only point on this would be not much, but just inch that full line of text just over just a smidge so it fits center of that empty space, and it'll be great. Never drive a hatchback to Austria. This one, I really like the graphics on. It's really great. It lets you know exactly what you're picking up right away. It's going to be about travel, and it's going to be about a hatchback. It's great. This is one of the cases where I would shrink the author name a bit because it is conflicting with the title. So because it's close to the same size, not necessarily, 14 point to 18 point have you, but in terms of the amount of space it takes up. So because it's such a wider font, it's competing too much against the title. So I bring that down just a bit. And the title at the bottom, I really like the layout that you've done here. It's just competing with that kayak a bit too much, which you may or may not necessarily need. If you really want to keep it, I'd almost shrink the top elements a bit, or maybe you'll have a bit more room when you lower the size of the author's name to scooch everything up a little, but you just want to create a bit more room around your title so it's really, really visible and really, really clear. But other than that, I thought this one was a really great start as well. Of all that is seen and unseen. So this one, I really like the concept that you're trying to go for here, the all-seeing eye, the artwork. It's really great, it's intriguing, and it's really abstract, which is perfect. It's just the placement and a bit of the layout for this one. So what I would do here is the back image, the eye-seeing eye, the art, bring that up. Make it as abstract and as visually intriguing as you possibly can. I'd be careful of your title. This one's really, really close to the top. I'd make things fit a bit more comfortably. Mind your margins. Make sure you give yourself enough space so everything fits nice and comfortably in your box. especially if this is going to go to print, because if you have things that close to the edge, because of the way things are cut, you could lose some of your title. Same with the typography here. You'll want to make things more sans serif, clean it up just a little bit, and maybe experiment with different contrasts for this. There's a really, really nice turquoisey green. Maybe you could use that. Maybe use the white, have it really, really bold against the back, and bring your text up. Don't be afraid to make the text almost the entire cover. If you look at a lot of the nonfiction books, any of the paperbacks, lots of them make the typography the main focal point and have a really cool abstract background to help emphasize this. I think this cover could do just that, and it would look really, really great. So just bring that background image up as much as you can and just mess around with that typography so it matches a bit more to what else is in the market. So as I said, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get through everybody's, but I do have some important steps for you to take away if I wasn't able to talk about your cover or your genre, or if you haven't even started yet and you want to make a go. Most important thing for steps to great book design is know your genre. It's so important. This is the one area of art where you need to stand out, but at the same time, you need to look like everybody else on the shelf, because if you don't look like the other books on the shelf, people aren't going to know what it is they're picking up, so they won't pick it up. If you have a beautiful cover with really crazy, whimsical fonts and a beautiful, stunning fairy, and everything's bright and happy and cheery sitting next to a thriller novel, people are not going to believe it's a thriller novel. The book could be about, you know, a killer fairy, but people won't know. So make sure that whatever you decide to do for your cover, it matches what others are doing in the genre. Which leads you on to typography. Your typography defines the genre. If you look at where your book sits in the market and see what type and fonts that all the other authors and publishing houses are using for those books, you'll see they're pretty similar. So you'll want to stay that route, because it also helps define what it is a potential reader is looking at when they go to pick up your book. Avoid using too many fonts. As I said, it makes things really, really all over the place, look a little bit cluttered, makes it difficult for the eye to see what it is they're looking at. So try to stick to 2. But as I said, if you have a lot of text, so title, author, tagline, quotes, that's when you can venture out a little bit, but at the very most, stick to 3. And be creative. There are so many free fonts out there. Go find them. You don't have to use Times New Roman. You don't have to use Arial. And please, for every designer everywhere, don't use Comic Sans. I know it's a running joke, but it's a thing. Please don't do it. Like I said, there are so many free sites out there. Just type in, if your book's fantasy, type in fantasy font, and it'll give you hundreds that you can use. Less is always more. Pick one clear element of your book that you want to build on and focus on that. Don't shove too much at the reader too quickly. It's just going to look, again, cluttered. They're not going to know what's going on. They're not going to be able to determine what it is they're looking at, what type of book they're looking at, and it'll just be a bit too all over the place. So pick one element, one clear thing that you really want to get across, and go with that. I know we didn't touch on this too much, but I do feel it's really important. Whether you're doing it yourself or getting a pro, most pros should already know this, but be mindful of RGB versus CMYK. So what I mean by that is ebooks are RGB, they're on the web, while CMYK is for print. If you're having your book solely for web, you're fine. There are so many colors available on the web. You could use any color under the sun and it'll be fine. The problem you have is if you're going for print, because print does not have the same range of colors that the web does. So if your cover is created in web and you go to professionally print it, somebody should check along the way. But if they don't, make sure it's CMYK, or else whatever you saw on screen is not going to look how it prints out. So be careful. And lastly, ask a pro. when in doubt, ask us. We do this for a living. We know. Most designers, if it's really quick, what's the difference between RGB and CMYK? What's the resolution that my cover needs to be, or whatever? Most designers will be happy to answer a few quick questions, because at the end of the day, it helps us too. So don't be afraid to ask. And more often than not, there are so many great designers on Reedsy. Message one of them and ask them how much the consultation fee would be. Most would be happy to have a chat. So even if you're not quite ready, or you're not sure where to go for a cover, or what type of genre your book is, or who knows, message a designer and find out how much the consultation fee is, and they'd be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And speaking of which, of course, you are one of our fantastic designers here on Reedsy. Really means a lot to me that you took the time in what probably is one of the busiest times of the year for you. Going up to Christmas is never not busy, but really, really appreciate it. So, guys, I dropped Natasha's profile link on the comments here. So if you're looking for someone to work with on your next book cover, Natasha's fantastic. If she mocks up one of your covers today and you want to know how to get your hands on that, you can also contact her that way. But in particular, is there a type of book or a project or a genre that you're really looking for in the new year, say?
So I am a bit of a weird one. If I had to pick, I really, really am drawn to YA and science fiction. They're the covers where I get to be the weirdest, so I really, really love those. But funnily enough, when it comes to me as a designer, I'm actually just really struck by the story. So if you have a really, really great story, if it's something that I want to read myself, it could really be from any genre. And if I want to read it, I'm all over it, because my mind just starts going wild. So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. Cool. Well, yeah, so you're pretty much booked up to the end of the year, but yeah, come New Year, just send Natasha a request there. If you want to do me a favor again, you can like and subscribe to this video. Mean a lot to me. We're back in the new year with more Reedsy Lives, another one on editing and querying books. I know a lot of you are interested in that topic. Thanks once again, Natasha. Really appreciate you taking the time. Hope you have a great Christmas.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.